Hi everybody, welcome to week 2. This is just a quick overview of the introductory material that you've looked at on early modern Japanese literature. You do need to read both of those introductions, or all three of those introductions, the intro to the period, the intro to haiku, and then the intro to the play that we've read on your own as well. I'm just hitting a few highlights. The purpose really is to walk you through a few of these things and add a few of my own thoughts. Particularly, I want to point out some of the ways in which what we're reading this week echoes or is similar to or reflects some of what we're going to experience in other literatures that we're going to explore, and also direct influence of Japanese art and literature on Western art and literature, European art and literature. Your introduction points out the importance of the Tokugawa shogunate to establishing the context or environment in which a lot of these art forms could really flourish. The clan set up shop, or the shogunate was ruled from the city of Edo, which is modern day Tokyo. And it's interesting because, of course, Tokyo is still a powerhouse in Japan, but also in terms of impact on world culture. The impact in general of Japanese culture on world culture really has continued to flourish. Anime is a good example of a Japanese art form which has really made itself felt, not just in its own popularity, but in how it's impacted the style of all sorts of primarily films or shows. So, at any rate, the shogunate, under the shogunate, you develop this very hierarchical society. One thing that was different about this, although you had the samurai class largely still ruling, they gradually become more and more bureaucrats than warriors. You begin to see some social mobility, and especially merchants who become wealthy began to have real influence in society. Literacy began to become more widespread, and then as a result, book making and book publishing, or bookstores, bookmaking and book selling began to flourish. And so you get a lot of people reading for pleasure, and so you see this flourishing of writing. It becomes a viable source of income for the writers because there are people reading what they're writing. One of the things that led to a significant change in Japanese society was the gradual acceptance or development of a monetary source of income. And this arose largely from the fact that rice, which was a staple of the economy, was simply too difficult to haul about in an urban setting and use still as a primary form of currency. And so you see coined money beginning to become a significant element in Japanese life. And you'll again see this referenced in this week's readings, particularly in the play we're reading. One thing you'll notice in this picture is that this is not only a picture which represents the rice trade, but it's also a picture that represents the first Portuguese, or among the first Portuguese traders to come into Japan, and their presence began to be felt more and more. Christianity was introduced by the Portuguese. It had mixed reception, and oftentimes the Christian converts were persecuted. One of the things that begins to evolve in these urban centers are these areas, these pleasure quarters. Oshiwara is the name of the pleasure quarter in Tokyo. And this is really the setting for the play, and so much of what undergirds the play that we've read, the love suicides, is this element of Japanese culture, this strange kind of accepted, quasi-accepted form of prostitution, and all of the social competition that goes into that. For example, you see in the play the economic status of the men vying for the prostitutes' affections is a significant element in the play. You've probably seen this print before, and one of the art forms that evolves in Japan at this time are these wood block prints. And you can see I've got a typo up there, and I will change that for future runs. But since I'm 5 minutes into this one, I will simply acknowledge that this is not a wood block print, it is a wood block print. I apologize for that. You can see I've added my own bits and pieces throughout, kind of even right up to airtime here. This is the style of these prints is immensely influential around the world, and particularly on modern artists and on the Impressionists. You see, for example, and you can almost see an echo of the shape here in Van Gogh's Starry Night. But you definitely see this flattening. The representation of the image is less important than saying something about the image. In Impressionism, about the play of light in the image. And here you see this is a painting all about light. Toulouse-Lautrec is a French painter who really comes closest. I mean, the example, many of these are of these uh, wood blocks. Sorry, I'm uh, mulling as I'm talking, as I'm going through the presentation. And many of these woodblocks portrayed life in the pleasure quarters, and you saw the slide on the pleasure quarters, you actually saw a woodblock print of that. Toulouse-Lautrec really very much emulated the style of those woodblocks in his own art, especially his poster art. This is an example of a poster he created celebrating a dancer in the Moulin Rouge, that his subjects were oftentimes dancers in the Moulin Rouge, and so this is simply another example of that. Not all of his paintings have this sort of very flat style that echoes that Japanese style, but they're all heavily influenced by Impressionism. The posters, definitely, if you go through and Google Toulouse-Lautrec posters, you're going to see that style echoed here, and the subject matter very much echoed. Kabuki theater we're going to talk about again in just a couple of minutes, but Kabuki theater and then the Bunraku puppet theater are the two forms of Japanese theater that have the most impact, or at least are most reflected in the work that we've read for this week. It was originally written as a puppet play, but was later and reinterpreted or presented on the Kabuki stage. Kabuki theater is highly stylized. There's a great deal of makeup which portrays or helps portray certain social types. These tend to be set in urban settings, Kabuki plays, and are very much about the social roles, or very much the social roles of the characters play a key role in the plays. This puppet theater is really remarkable, and I want you to watch. I've included a video of a bit of a performance. It's not a performance of our play, but it's a performance that is somewhat along the traditional lines that we're reading about here. So you can kind of imagine what it might have looked like when the play was performed. It's a very popular art form. It's made with puppets. These aren't Muppets, and they're not cute little puppets dancing on strings. Oftentimes, you can see here even the puppeteers are actually on stage manipulating the puppets. Some of the puppets were nearly human size, and the performance, the acting out of the action by the puppets is accompanied by two other performers, a chanter who does all the voices, including the narration, and then somebody playing the shamisen, which is your text compares it to a banjo. When you hear the sound, it does not sound very banjo-like, I think, but the instrument is made somewhat like a banjo. It is not dueling banjos going on in the background during these puppet plays. You also see an evolution of very unorthodox poetry, and this is something that echoes or points towards a lot of what happens in modern poetry in the West. You have very traditional forms slowly, gradually giving away to more and more experimental forms. And so you have this evolution of linked verse, which are a series of yes, the structure of the verses tend to be very standardized. You have the 5-7-5 syllabic breakdown that you see in haiku. You read about that, alternating with verses that have different line lengths. But still, the whole point of this change is to begin to break down the line and allow the poet more room to experiment. Haibun is a prose essay, and you're reading a prose essay with snippets of haiku in it for this week. And haiga are the ink paintings, and you see oftentimes these two are combined. And you see here an ink painting. And I'm sorry, my mouse snuck in there. You're seeing an ink painting combined with verse there on the side. For this week's assignment, I'm actually having you produce some examples of this for the discussion board, and you'll see that in the course itself. Um, just an example here, and you've read further examples in the text as well. Now, just quick, an overview of Asian drama, and I've focused this primarily on Japanese. The original had some of the Chinese drama as well, but we're not studying Chinese dramas this term. I've left those out. There's very much an interest in Asian literature and very short lyrical poetry. Lyrical poetry tends to focus on a single theme using powerful images, and they tend to try to evoke strong emotion. And you'll see this in the haiku samples that we will be reading in the text. The characteristics of Japanese drama, or of Asian drama, a lot of them combine dance music and chant and singing. So when you think about, for example, Chinese opera is not a bunch of people standing around on stage in fancy clothes belting out songs. It's very involved. You saw the interpretation of the Journey to the West, which was a Chinese opera form of it, and that is very much it's a modern adaptation, but it is not out of the norm for that kind of drama. You see so much happening on stage with gymnasts and singers and just all. It's a performance. Cirque du Soleil with plot, I guess, is how you could think about it. They also have very fixed roles, kind of traditional musical themes that come in and out. Oftentimes, we don't know who wrote what because a lot of these plays were passed down from troupe to troupe, and usually that happened within families. A lot of the performers actually were part of a family that was a performing family, so that we don't tend to know who wrote what because many of the stuff was passed down orally. And this stuff was really a challenge for the performers. We don't read any no plays, but I think no drama it sets the stage for the very stylized theater that we see later on. This just precedes and leads into the kabuki and puppet theater that we're going to be exploring right now. These again are very, very stylized. They involve chanting, oftentimes bringing in Buddhist hymns or sacred chants, and you see that retained in the puppet theater. And that clip that I've shared with you in the classroom will demonstrate that for you. There tend to be very few actors, and something, if you were in the World Masterpieces the first semester, I don't know if you've taken any Shakespeare courses, you will know that, for example, all roles were played by men. This was typically the case as well in Japanese drama. You'd have a handful of actors portraying different characters. How would they portray these different characters? Well, they would wear masks, and the masks would represent the various type characters. And that's a big part of this as well. You have stereotype characters that you see again and again and again. So when a character walks onto the stage, the audience will right away, from the nature of the mask that the character is wearing, have some idea what role that character is about to play in the drama. And we see masks elsewhere as well. Greek drama was also performed in masks. Part of the reason Greek drama might have been performed in masks, they think many of the masks we have, they have these wide open mouths, and there's some thought that that might have been developed to help the actor's voice project better. Because these were outdoor theaters in Greek dramas, they were performed in outdoor theaters. This is a mask of a philosopher. And so when the character walked on the stage wearing this mask, right away the audience knew, there's a philosopher, and they would go to sleep. This is another form of type drama, which began in Italy, but was tremendously influential throughout Europe. And you're going to see echoes of this still in Tartuffe, which we're going to be reading for week 3 for next week. And these are types from the Commedia dell'arte. These are some of the types. The Harlequin clown, and you can see an example number 5 here. That Harlequin clown, that Harlequin with the split makeup and all of that, originated in Commedia dell'arte. So it's a figure that you'll oftentimes see in out and about, not out and about in your neighborhood, but you'll see that image frequently portrayed nowadays. And this is where the Harlequin evolved out of. But other types would be like the ingenue, which would be the young woman, quasi innocent, and these other various types. You'd see them in play after play after play, and the audience would recognize them. Now, what made the plays interesting was the different ways in which these characters would interact, the skill with which dialogue and these things are written, that sort of thing. But it was not anticipated that each play would create and craft distinctive, unique characters. So part of the fun of going to the play was recognizing and knowing who these characters were, and then being able to anticipate somewhat what role they're going to play in the play itself. And we touched on this earlier on the kabuki theater and the puppet theater, and I will take these second repetitions of those slides out in my future run of this course. I apologize for that, but I don't want to restart 16 minutes in. As I said, I haven't taught this for a while, so I will be editing as I move into my next run of it. One thing I wanted to point out is kabuki theater and even the puppet theater have had a tremendous influence on a handful of Western artists. A few of them, William Butler Yeats and Ezra Pound, both modern poets. Bertolt Brecht is especially interesting because Brecht is a German playwright, and a lot of what Brecht was about was trying to break down the illusion of reality that had become such a part of the theater. We're not going to read a play that came out of the realism movement. We're going to read some novels that came out of that movement. But Anton Chekhov, for example, is somebody whose plays were extremely realistic. Henrik Ibsen is somebody whose plays were extremely realistic. They are called fourth wall plays sometimes, and they're written in such a way that the audience is basically looking through one of the walls onto the stage, and everything is designed to be as realistic as possible. So it's like you're looking into someone's house, like you removed a wall of a house or a wall of whatever space the play is taking part in, and you're looking in, and it's as realistic as possible. Brecht comes along and says, well, it's not real. So it's actually more authentic if we remind the audience again and again that things aren't real, that this is not real. And so he embraced a lot of the stylized elements of Japanese drama. And one of the things that he did is he used to encourage audience members in his theaters, or people pretending his plays, to smoke. And his thinking was that when you're smoking, that act of smoking prevents you from getting as into the play because you're thinking about smoking. It's sort of a distancing thing. So if you're watching a movie and you really get into the movie, you actually would not be doing what Brecht wants you to do. Brecht doesn't want you to forget that this is art. He wants to remind you that you're watching an illusion. So that is it. That is my introduction to modern Japanese literature. Do carefully read the intros in the text as well. I hope this has been somewhat helpful. And again, it was an excuse for me to throw in a few other observations and ideas. But you do need to read those intros carefully as well, and then get on with it. Watch the videos in the class, and then tackle that discussion question or questions this week. I guess I've got 2 of them packed in there.